Okay, everybody, we've got a fun one again. It's a little bit easy, I think. Not too difficult, but it involves a little bit more verse maybe than some people might be used to. Doing this is coming up soon. Yeah. But what we are going to be doing is a power-up. Now, we've done a few power-ups on this channel. We've done freezing, we've done invisibility, we've done speed, and of course the double pump shotgun, amongst a few here. But this time, we are going for super explosion. And that is the idea of this power-up. So we can explode stuff. Let's learn how to make this in verse. All right, we're inside of UEFN as usual. We've got a few things going on in this game. We've got some buildings. They're just normal buildings, normal props that we can explode for effect. This is also where the grind rails exist. If you haven't seen that tutorial, check it out. We make them go RGB with some sound devices. And right down in the middle is where our game manager lives. And it lives right next to this explosive device, which is what we're going to use to do an explosion. But I gotta admit, the explosion that comes off this explosive device is underwhelming, and half the time it fails. It's kind of weird. When you want to redo it, it doesn't do the explosion properly. So we're going to cover that as well. If you've never made a game manager before, there's a link in the description for that tutorial, so you can learn all about that. But this little computer device here is a creative device and allows us to control stuff in the scene. This game manager has a pile of stuff. We don't need everything in here because we've covered some of these things in the RGB grind rails one. And so we're not going to worry about the patchwork. We're not going to worry about the grind rail. We're not going to worry about the rocket. We're going to cover that in another tutorial. But we have the ED with it, which is the explosive device. And that's set to be this device right here. And then we have a VFX spawner, which lives over here. It doesn't matter where these things live. You can put them anywhere you want because we're going to move them later. So no big deal. Then we have the player spawner, the player spawn pad. So if we go into our outliner and then we move around and try to look for it, if you can't find it right away, just hit the F key. And that'll take you over to it. So this is where our player spawner is. We're going to need to hook this up in verse so that we can access the player once they're in the game. And that's everything inside of the scene here that we need to concentrate on. Let's take a look at the verse. Okay, we're inside of verse now. We've got our game manager and custom player files that we are going to be looking at. Inside of our game manager, we have our players map. Now, I've covered this in past tutorials, but essentially this is a way to keep track of players and to be able to manipulate and control things about them. You want to pretty much create this every time you make a game. Even if you don't use it, it's just good practice to use. So it's a map, and inside of there goes the player object, and that is a custom player attached to it as the value. This is the index, and the map is the object. Okay, so it's a player's map. We're going to have the editables here that we need. We've got our first three, as we saw in the details panel for this. Got our player spawner, our VFX explosion, because we're going to need that, and our explosive device. And that's all the objects we need to connect up in verse. Let's take a look at the on begin here. We can see we've got the player spawner, spawn event, subscribe, on player spawn. So we're going to go find that. We're going to hit Control F, and then it'll bring up this search. And we just hit the down arrow and it'll take us all the way down to where we have our on player spawned code. Close that up. We also need the on player removed, which is also in the on begin. So if we highlight this, hit Control F, and then go to where that is, we can see right here, it is also in on begin. So we want to know when a player is removed because we need to get them out of the player's map. All right, so let's go back down. Okay, so two things that we need to pay attention to that the player is doing. So the effect is that we do a power smash by jumping up and then crouching down. So in the on player spawn, we're going to want to check for some things on a particular player when they come in. So first things first is we just make sure we can get the player object, and then we see if they are in the player's map. And if they are, they'll do anything. If they aren't, we're going to create a new custom player, which I'm going to show you this code in a second. And we're going to pass in our agent object, the explosive device, and the VFX explosion object, which is just the VFX spawner. And then we set that inside of the map. We have to use an if statement to do that. And if that succeeds, which it should, I've never seen it fail, going to initialize the player, which essentially gives them a unique ID. And then we're going to grab the fort character, because the fort character is where we're going to be able to listen for all kinds of things. We can get the transform, which means we can get the location and rotation. All kinds of things happen on the fort character. So we're going to want to grab that. We'll call that FC for now, fort character. We want to grab the crouched event and the jumped event. And these two are vital for figuring out when we jump and then when we crouch. And we're going to subscribe to those inside of our new custom player on crouch. So we're going to put all the functionality inside of each player, which is a pretty good idea. Also, if you've seen a few of the tutorials here, you've already seen the on player removed. This is just code that removes an object from a map. It's convoluted. You've got to find the thing in the map, create a temporary map, and then overwrite that map with the one that you just removed a thing from. It's weird. This is really just a copy and paste sort of process without worrying too much about how it works. Okay, that concludes everything that's inside of the game manager. Let's go to the custom player. Inside of the custom player class, it is not a created device, so we don't define on begin. We've got our unique ID that we're going to set. This can be useful in the future. You can set up ways to make a unique ID. In this case, when we initialize the player, I'm just picking a random integer between 0 and 1,000,000. There's a pretty low chance there's going to be a duplicate of this number, but you can extend this out to make it even more impossible. Or in fact, what would be an even better option, which I'll probably do a tutorial on, is making a little utility that truly creates unique IDs. So we already know that we're passing in the agent object for this player and the explosive device and the VFX spawner device. Now, what we're not doing is instantiating them here. So we have to instantiate them here. Hopefully that makes sense. If we instantiate things like, for example, this logic, or if we had a VFX spawner device, we said equals VFX spawner device. If we instantiated it as an object, then we don't have to put it in here. But I like this. I like being able to sort of define the things that are going to go into my player. So we're going to take this out. Don't need this because we're passing it in when we create this object. So we initialize the player, creating a unique ID. So now we're going to do the two things that we need to do, and that's to see when we're crouching and when we're jumping. Okay, so this is a little bit confusing maybe if you've never done this kind of thing before. But essentially, we're going to catch the on-crouched events. So when the character crouches, then we say, is crouching true or not? And then we check, did we jump? Yes or no? And then we call explode, which is down here. I'll show you that in a second. And then if not, then set did jump to false, because essentially it means that we crouched without jumping, and we're just going to set the jumping value to false. We're keeping track if we're jumping or crouching. Now, inside of the on jumped, we're going to say, hey, did you jump? Yes, we jumped because we jumped, right? And then we spawn reset the jump because we want somebody to crouch within a second or so of jumping, which is in this delay time, which is 1 second. All right. So we set the did jump to true here. We then spawn a suspends function, which means it's going to have a delay to it. It's going to run after a little bit. And we reset the did jump to false so that when we crouch, so we're checking to see if we're crouching here, right? And then we see, did we jump within the last second? If so, explode. If not, then just set the did jump to false. Explode is an interesting one. It's very important because the explosive device can hurt you. We don't want it to hurt us. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the fort character of this player, and then we're going to teleport the explosive device to the player, and then we're going to teleport the VFX explosion device to the player. We're going to set ourselves to be invulnerable, and then we're going to enable the VFX spawner. We're going to explode the explosive device, and then we're going to reset our invulnerability after 1 second so that we are vulnerable again. And that's just by setting it true. We reset the explosive device, sleep for another second, and then make the VFX explosion go away as well. You can change these times as well. If you wanted them to be invulnerable for longer, then you can increase this time here. If you want to see this VFX explosion, or if you have a different VFX going off, then you could just delay this even longer, or shorter for that matter. And that is everything to this. Hopefully this has been interesting. Remember, all the code is over on Patreon if you don't want to write it out. If not, it's all here. Write it out, learn, and I will see you guys in the next one.